Good afternoon, Luang Por.
Good afternoon, Ajahn Sumedho.
So today is Saturday, 21st of June. Thank you for offering some time for a little reflection here. As I was mentioning earlier to you, someone recently was mentioning that they had to have an operation. And prior to the operation, they were really experiencing a lot of fear. Now, knowing about something about the teachings, they tried dealing with the fear, but they found it really overpowering. So they were wondering what reflections you might be able to offer around dealing with fear of this nature.
Well, the samsara, the world that we experience through the body and the senses, is frightening. That's its nature. And when we imagine, you can imagine anything in the future, such as the Third World War, that's scary, or death, or getting incurable disease, getting cancer. When we think about the future, there's a lot to have fear arise, because it's unknown, and the future is anything you imagine. So we have an imagination, like, I'm going to have an operation, I imagine it'll be something unpleasant or painful, or I might die, who knows? And all these thoughts tend to create this sense of I'm frightened of being operated on. And that's because the future is frightening for most people, because it's just getting old, getting sick, and dying. You know, when you put it in terms like that. And it's about the economy, about price of eggs, about what's going on in Iran, Israel, Gaza. All these things have, are in themselves. The war is exciting. Let's face it, war movies are very popular. But when war affects us individually, or the possibility of it, then it's very frightening. Like living here in England, it seems so peaceful at the monastery in Amaravati, that the idea of bombs dropping on it and seems so remote, but it's a way of thinking, it's a possibility. But what isn't frightening is here and now. Pure conscious awareness is never frightened. It's beyond fear. And so we call that nibbana, or enlightenment. And that's apparent here and now. But the future is unknown, and any scenario you imagine is possible. The past is a memory, and yet so many people suffer from guilt and shame about things they've done or said in the past. That's because they're attaching to memories, in a blind way, not with wisdom or understanding. But when I've had to consult with many people who suffer tremendous guilt when somebody close to them passes away, about how they should have been more careful or more loving, or shouldn't have told them lies. And so we, in our lifespan, so far we've all not been completely honest. And we've all imagined, like being a university student or a student of any sort, that fear of failure, of being criticized, of being humiliated by the other people, experts, teachers, parents, relatives. And so we suffer from guilt, even though when we examine memory, we see it's really nothing. It's just a passing phase that comes and goes according to the life we're living. And also trying to suppress fear makes it worse, because the more you try to suppress something you don't want, you don't like, and you identify with, and the stronger you're making it, the more it becomes an obsession. Like suppression or resistance to fear makes it stronger than before. So what do? Because we have to live with these bodies which are subject to old age, sickness, and death till it's time for them to die. And we identify. And that's the main delusion, is our identity, my fear, my body, and just those kind of perceptions limit us to a very vulnerable form in a world that is very uncertain, unstable. And so in the Buddhist terms, then we begin to reflect that our real home is Dhamma, apparent here and now, or mindfulness or awareness, pure conscious awareness, which is always here and now, whatever state your body's in, or the state of the world, and whatever you're experiencing. So the way out of fear is to recognize fear is a condition that arises and ceases. And as long as you're identified with a very vulnerable form, such as your own body, there's a lot to fear in life, because the COVID pandemic, the wars going on in the world, the frightening sense of climate change, and all the rest is, possibilities for suffering, which our bodies would experience, could experience, might experience. But the future, like a friend of mine fell down and hurt himself quite seriously. He's quite old, and he's, like falling down when you're old, or at any age, I imagine, is a shock to the body. And he can deal with that by seeing that he's not the body. The body is shocked because it's a impermanent condition that is about sensitivity. And falling down on the bathroom floor is, when you're old, is one of the frightening scenarios we all have. Like even myself, I think, bathroom is all hard surfaces, tiles, and wash basins and toilets. And when I go in there, you realize that you hear so many instances where old people fall down in the bathroom. And those are frightening stories, where when I was young, I didn't even think about it. And I just took it for granted. But old age makes the body weak and disabled and sometimes very, difficult to maneuver. And even like going to the bathroom can be, quite a difficult experience for elderly people, because to manage the body, to make it walk and enter into a cold tile room where you might fall down because you can't see very well is natural, in the sense that when we identify with the body, when we see it as my body, in those terms, then we create a lot of fear about it. Where if our refuge is in awareness here and now, then that gives us a sense of well-being, because it is happy to be not a mortal form, to not be identified with instability and change and conditions that beyond one's physical, mental control, that our real refuge is in awareness, what we call Dhamma, conscious awareness, and that we cannot, once we realize our true nature, which is that, the deathless reality that we all share, then we'll do with life as we experience it through the karma of the physical form and the world that we experience sensitivity with.
So in the case of this person or anyone pre-operation, you'd recommend just allowing the fear to be as it is, but take a stand with being the witness of the fear, as you like to say. Is that right?
Be the knower of fear rather than the fear. It's like this. It's something. It's not wrong to fear an operation. It's not bad. It's not like you're committing some sin or doing something wrong, but we make it, our whole life can be built on fear, just through this ignorance of our true nature. And that's what the Buddha is pointing to, is our true nature is this, awareness. It's not this very unstable form that we've been told is what we are, because we've all been told we are the body. We are a boy or girl, or black or white, or Jewish, or Christian, or Buddhist. We've been told this as we grow up, by our culture, by our parents. And so we operate from all the things we've been told, then that creates a sense of fear, because all these things like physical strength can weaken, we can be disabled, we can be great athletes, we can lose the tennis tournament, we can win. All these are seen in very personal ways. I'm a winner or I'm a loser. And this is all the illusions we create, which, when you want to be a winner, then you're afraid of losing. And if you're a loser, then you want to be a winner. So life is about winning and losing. It's not about winning everything and never losing. But a relationship to winning and losing is through awareness, seeing that this is a made-up condition, I want to be a winner, I don't want to be a loser, is a creation made out of ignorance, not out of wisdom.
You pointed out earlier how it's not about getting rid of fear. Sometimes, and I understand this is where this question was pointing, what this question was pointing to is that when we have little practice, fear is overwhelming, and this notion that with more practice we can handle the fear better. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that's built on the assumption that you are a meditator practicing.
Or not.
And you want to get something out of it. I want to conquer fear. What is that really but the ego? Does pure consciousness want to get rid of fear? Because it isn't frightened. Nothing to get rid of. But the ego is always threatened. We could be injured, humiliated, despised, disabled. You know, when you think of the world that we live in, this samsara that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel, it's all frightening. What'll happen if Europe goes to war? What will happen will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? I mean, it's just natural. Fear is about thinking, about the delusion that about yourself is a very mortal, sensitive form. When you're meditating, right meditation is recognizing that the body is this way. It's, you know, it has its function, it's a karmic form. You inherit your genes from your mother and father, and whether they're good genes or bad genes, you have no say in the matter. You get whatever. When the egg and sperm come together, and you have to reap the karma of that engagement in terms of physicality, health, and life in the world. But if you realize you're not a mortal form, because what is aware of fear isn't frightened. If you just observe, not try to get rid of it, but be the witness rather than the fear. So in my own experience, I had a lot of fear and to deal with. And it wasn't that anything was that frightening as my life in Thailand, but there was no kind of threats or that I felt personally, but fear of the dark, fear of being wrong, fear of making a mistake, fear of being humiliated, being condemned as a bad monk, fear of malaria, fear of dengue fever. And one year I was at a branch monastery, and I woke up one morning feeling very unusually ill and weak, and I was told by the head monk I had malaria. Well, to me, my background, American, brought up childhood during the Second World War, and you hear these stories of American soldiers having malaria, goes through the brain, you go crazy. So I had all kinds of memories of images I had of malaria, And at that time, I was really obsessed with getting samadhi or concentration. And I was in a very quiet place where I was able to really concentrate. And I felt I was really developing samadhi. But notice that it's me, as mortal form, Sumedho, that was taking credit for the samadhi. And so I wanted more samadhi. And but I couldn't do it. I couldn't concentrate properly with these fevers, malarial fevers. And one day Luang Por came to see me, and I kind of whingingly said, Luang Por, I can't concentrate anymore. I can't meditate. And he smiled and says, malaria is your meditation. So fear is your meditation. It's like this. And when you take an objective view of it, it's just, the future is naturally uncertain, unstable, and the only certainty is we're all going to die, if that's any consolation. So I changed my attitude about samadhi and just started witnessing malaria as I experienced it through the body. And, I found I could do that. I could just observe how these cycles of malarial fevers would come and go, and you get very feverish, and then suddenly it would all collapse and the fever would go, and you get this sense of cool relief. And I began to think, well, that's the pleasant side of malaria. I began to see through the illusions I had about American GIs on the islands of the South Pacific getting high fevers and dying of malaria, which was information given to me when I was a child, which had no relationship to the reality of where I was, who I am, and the conditions I was experiencing through my body and senses. So I found out that actually malaria wasn't that bad, because I wasn't frightened of it anymore. I witnessed that all the serious things that I'd been informed with about the disease were memories, conditions that were part of my youth, my childhood. With the actual reality, I could be the witness to, because I couldn't concentrate on the breath or on kind of getting intensely calm, just sitting in a Thai forest, sweating in a little hut in a remote place in northeast Thailand. And, I learned a lot. I had a lot of insight from malaria itself. And it's through being the witness to these conditions, like fear, be the witness to it, not the frightened person. And that will be very strengthening, and wisdom arises from that kind of practice. Where when you're just trying to be brave and face up to it, and stiff upper lip, and everything will, people say everything's going to be okay. Don't depend on that kind of reinforcement. That's what people say. Everything's okay. And that's what we want to hear. But when we hear that there's something wrong, a crisis at the monastery, we don't want to hear that. And just tell me everything's okay, even if it isn't. So you can just console yourself. It'll be all right. It'll be okay. You can affirm that everything's going to be okay, but you don't know. But being the knowing that whatever is okay or disaster is what you're thinking here and now. It's words, it's concepts. Okay makes us think I'm not frightened, everything's going to be okay. But you haven't really dealt with fear. You just covered it over with okay, and fear itself is still latent, in your mind. And you have to smother it with everything's okay. But there's no wisdom that arises from that till you realize everything okay is a condition not to grasp, or everything's going to fall apart and be a disaster. That's another condition we grasp, maybe through resisting that, trying to get rid of it, and trying to hold on to everything's okay. So that these two kind of graspings, holding on to the fairyland, Alice in Wonderland, live happily ever after scenarios that we think, and that's what we want in life as ignorant human beings. But when we wake up, then this old age, okay, so actually it is. It's still not what you want as a person. One doesn't, as a personality, I don't want to be old. But as a sage, as a wise person, then it's okay. It's like this. Whatever forms and conditions it brings to me in my experience in this form. Because I don't resist it, and I don't try to smother it with positive thinking.
Thank you very much, Luang Por.